Hi. Hi, I'm Veronica. And, I'm awkward. I just am. I'm sorry. But that's part of me and part of my story. And I was talking to Stephen before the service, and although I'm used to speaking to groups of people and teaching and things like that, this particular story that I'm going to share with you tonight feels very vulnerable because it's about sex. And so, and me and sex. And so I felt very vulnerable with that. And so I was telling Stephen that I was nervous, but I felt so compelled after a sermon in which Jim spoke, and because I kept thinking, okay, speak deeper, speak into my truth. You know how that happens sometimes when people are preaching and you think, wow, I wish that person would just go deeper, just touch on my story, speak into my truth. And so I just kept thinking that and waiting, and although he almost always does, he didn't. And I was just like, oh. And I was frustrated, not with you, Jim, but just in general. And God said, hey, Veronica, maybe you need to share your story to speak into my truth and speak into my story. So I did. So then I stayed up late at night, much to Aaron's dismay, and wrote this story on a Facebook Messenger to Jim. So I'm going to share it with you. And this is one of my stories, and it's a story of how God used my sex to rescue myself. And, okay, Jerry, can you guys put the picture up? So when I look at, you know which one I'm talking about? Poor Jerry. I emailed him a picture, and it was fuzzy, and he said, I'll work with it. I'll make it work. This is me. I was 5, almost 6. And when I look at pictures of myself when I was quite young, teetering off the edge of toddler years and into girlhood, I'm reminded of a duckling, all yellow, fluffy hair and shy eyes and vulnerability. I was a very sensitive child. I was a bit odd, and I was really smart. I'm not ashamed to say it, I was. It made me even more odd. My parents didn't know quite what to do with me, how to take me. If y'all are gonna watch this, that's all I'm going to say about you guys. Love you. And that's all, it's good things. But I often find myself in similar situations as an adult because I'm aware that I'm quirky. I'm aware that I'm strange. One time Chris was up here and he's like, God, Veronica, you are so spastic. And I was like, I know. I don't know what else to do. So anyway, so that girl that I put up there, that sweet girl, I put her up here to demonstrate this girl I remember, and she was the girl before. Okay, she's the girl before. I was just turned 6, and when my body and my sexuality were brutally victimized. And I wish I could say it was the last time, or the only time, I would know such wounding at the hands of another in my life. Though once is so much more than any person should ever have to bear. But it wasn't my last sexual wounding. And I really hope that I'm the only person at Cathedral who experienced deep and lasting sexual suffering as a child. But the odds are against me on that front too. And for that I am deeply, deeply sorry. So, my wounding, externally invisible but all too real, grew me up with a broken sexuality. And I was filled with desperation to really be loved enough by someone to finally feel safe in my skin. And so to that end, I pursued external beauty, the deception of perfection. And in appearance and behavior, from ship to sheets, I thought I could lock it down. I was all about performance and persona, and sexual performance was important, of course, as I believed that sex and sexual intimacy were things that you could practice and become good at. I believed the key to satisfying sexuality, to satisfying the sexual nature of who I was made to be involved the approval of anybody else. And I embraced this idea that pleasing another person was a skill that I could learn well enough to keep brutality or pain at bay, to protect myself. And I was wrong about that. So hear me, dear ones. I could not be skilled enough at pleasing someone else. I could not be in control enough to protect myself from being hurt. You hear that? Control? At the same time, and in an all too Western understanding of bifurcated self, physical, spiritual, I covered my spiritual self in what I believed was this cloak of righteousness. I dove into rules and regulations, many of them incredibly sexually repressive, which I loved, at the evangelical church where I served and worshiped, where I hid. Women leading worship weren't allowed to wear sexually provocative clothing like a sleeveless shirt, or a skirt that fell above the knee. I was once reprimanded by a worship leader for making a hand motion with my microphone during worship that could incite the lust of men and lead them down a path of sin. But that's where I was, and I took it in. I took that criticism and absorbed it, and I was like, yeah, I believed it was my responsibility to keep the sexual desires of other people in check where I was concerned, right? I can't be too provocative or I might get hurt. It's my responsibility to not be too sexy or I could be wounded. Okay, so that's kind of where I was, and so all of that gave me an illusion of control. It made me feel like I was in control because I'm like, oh well, I got this. Okay, be a lady in the streets, and more aggressive in the sheets. So that gave me these illusions of control, and it worked for me for a long time. I had this picture-perfect life, and I had convinced myself that the things that were perpetrated on my person in my youth were no big deal in the larger scheme of things. That I'd pulled myself up by my bootstraps, although I didn't have any boots, and made a hell of a life for myself. I had it all. My form was pleasing, check. My makeup well applied, check. My hair dyed a flattering shade of blonde at the best salon. I miss you, Richard Haler, check. My home was a reflection of the same. My living room was inviting and well lit. And I often had fresh cookies baked for visitors, but my closet was another story. And I'm not talking about a figurative gay closet. I'm talking about my closet. It was overflowing with dirty laundry, actual dirty clothes that were hidden away and shoved behind the door. So shortly before my journey into sexual healing began, I found myself literally incapable of washing underwear anymore. It just seemed so filthy. I was dirtying everything closest to me with my sex. So a dear friend, I hadn't talked about this with anybody, but everybody knew my laundry problem because I talked about my laundry. God, I don't know why, I just can't make myself do the laundry. I'll do the dishes, but I just won't do it. And so a dear friend convinced me to try a life improvement workshop that turned out to be intensive group therapy. Surprise. We dove into our childhoods, expressing wounding and working through many traumas that had been long hidden. And at the conclusion of that week, the facilitators pulled me aside and they made a special request. And they asked me to put on this like sparkly, very short dress and to dance sexually and provocatively to Proud Mary by Tina Turner. And they really wanted me. They said, go and find the most Tina Turner thing you can find at the thrift shop. And we want you to go all out. So that was an interesting shopping trip for me. But they asked me to dance on behalf of all the women whose inner peace had been stolen by sexual trauma. They asked me to dance for myself. And so this was a pivotal life moment for me. And I agreed, feeling nauseous and panicked, not much different from the way I felt before I came up here tonight. But no one in the group of 24 people there pursuing healing alongside me knew what I was going to do. And time really gets fuzzy for me, even now as I try to remember what I did when I got dressed and all that. But the thing I really remember the most is after I was all dressed up, we were in a hotel, and I went and found this little corner hidden away from everyone because they gave us roommates, so I couldn't hide in my room. So I was in this corner that no one could see, dressed like as close to Tina Turner as I could come, and I was on my knees, just shaking, and I could feel my hose on the Berber carpet running, and just everything in my body was trembling. And basically, I just rocked back and forth with my head in my hands, praying, oh God, oh God. I was terrified. Even though I knew logically that I was completely safe, it was so exposing. And in that moment that I prayed, oh God, I truly believe it was the first real prayer that I ever prayed. So moments later, a young woman who was going through the therapy stumbled across my hiding place. She was as surprised to find me there as I was to be found. I think it was because I was very near to the bathroom. Without asking a thing, she dropped her knees and she wrapped her arms around me in a consuming embrace, and she just rocked me as I wept, murmuring these wordless sounds of comfort. I was struck in that moment by God's answer to my prayer. This girl, this beautiful young girl who had just finished her military service overseas. And she had been exposed to numerous acts of sexual violence and violation there. So before this moment, I'd never seen her in anything other than a hoodie sweatshirt. So it's kind of fascinating to me looking back in that moment. She was this woman hiding from herself, sent by God to comfort me in my distress. And isn't that a beautiful picture of how we can minister to others even in the midst of our own pain? And how if we'll allow ourselves to turn the corner, sometimes that happens. That was beautiful for me. Anyway, later when we were all together, all these women and men from all walks of life, the lights were dimmed and Tina Turner's gravelly voice began the introduction to Proud Mary. And I could feel sensation begin to tremble inside me, deep inside the marrow of my bones, deeper than fear. Something eternal, some force, incredible and unbreakable, was keening like a tuning fork from deep inside my womb and up my spine. And suddenly, as I looked at that warm-blooded group of people and saw the reflection of lights glimmering off my dress that exposed every inch of my thighs, I felt wild. I became undomesticated, wanton, fully comfortable with being desired in that moment because I was everything that womankind was made to be, this facile, undulating, rhythmic, fertile life giver, an earthy goddess who had the strength and ability to satisfy every craving without losing myself. So that knowledge and understanding kind of shook from the pinky white arches of my feet and shimmied up the back of my legs and rocked my hips in a cradle that could please anyone on earth. But most of all, in that moment, that cradle pleased myself. Okay. I was deeply pleased. So I danced erotically and exotically and powerfully, looking each person in the eyes, watching their bodies move in the wake of the waves I created in my beauty and power, watching them laugh and cry and shout and feeling their gaze upon me. I was feeling their gaze for the very first time, not fearing their gaze. I accepted each of their expressions and their feelings as their own and not mine. This heat, this sweat, and salty passion was a God-given part of my nature that had been too long shamed away. The dark-hearted interlopers who'd stolen my innocence were burned away by the incandescence of God alive in me. Thank you, God. And I had these hot, wet tears burning with healing, and they rolled down my face as I danced, and I laughed, and I said, oh God, I'm free. I'm free. And in that moment, I was. Second real prayer I've ever prayed in my life. After that dance, that pivotal and precious few minutes of life I spent in which the glow of my skin and the heat of my soul were intertwined, I fell in love with myself. I really did. Yeah. Because God had designed that little yellow duckling girl who would grow into someone like me. And God had done good. I made it my mission to get to know the Veronica that God made, which made me tick, what made me smile, what made me laugh, no matter how socially frowned upon or seemingly strange, because I saw reflections of the Creator in each sensate pleasure. Back then, even things as small as like a raindrop on the back of my hand shimmering off my skin brought me ineffable joy. And so what surprised me most about this, about opening myself to loving the Veronica that God made, and that surrender, because really in the end it was a surrender of control. It opened me to love other people, no matter how different they were from me. And as I find myself romanced and charmed by that quirky little darling I once was, and I still treasure protectively inside of me, I often see precious little ones inside many other people. I see it so often. I'll be talking to you, you'll come up to me, and I'll see you as you are, a strong and honorable man. Then I see that little boy, and I am overwhelmed with love for you. Anyway, this love for you guys sometimes overwhelms me in prayers that have no words. And so oftentimes I find my body moving of its own accord in worship as I am swayed by the power of God's presence in each of the people I see in the congregation. Shimmering skinned vessels of unique God love. Each of you reflecting the multifaceted glory of the nature of Creator God. Man, you guys are really beautiful and hot and beautiful. But anyway, so if you get the chance to speak with me sometimes and you find me a little sensitive and a bit odd, I ask that each of you say a prayer of gratitude in that moment, because God just allowed you a glimpse of eternity as it resides in me. And without finding my sexuality, I would have missed out on the irreplaceable gift of knowing this whole and holy, beautiful self. So thank you, God. God of the second chance, God of rebirth, and God of redemption. And God who makes all things new. So that's it. Thank you.